They say you never truly know someone until you share property with them. In my case, it took a lakefront cabin, a manipulative husband, and a greedy sister-in-law to show me exactly who I had been sharing my life with for the past 12 years. "Jennifer, my sister really needs our vacation home this summer," my husband Derek said, not even looking up from his phone as he dropped this bombshell over our Sunday morning coffee. "Their house flooded last week and the renovations will take months. I already told her they could use it." I froze, coffee cup halfway to my lips as the words sank in. Our cherished woodland retreat on Cedar Lake, the one I had purchased with my own money before we were even married, was apparently being offered up without my knowledge or consent. The worst part wasn't even the presumption. It was the casualness of it all, as if my opinion on the matter wasn't just secondary, it was irrelevant. What happened next changed everything. Not just my summer plans, but my marriage, my future, and my understanding of what it means to stand up for yourself when the people who should have your back are the ones pushing you down. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm 42 years old, a marketing executive at a mid-sized agency in Chicago, and until recently, I believed I was in a respectful, equal partnership with my husband Derek. We lived in a comfortable brownstone in Lincoln Park with our golden retriever, Rusty. No children. A mutual decision we made early in our relationship so we could focus on our careers and traveling. At least, that's what Derek told me it was. Mutual. I met Derek at a charity gala 14 years ago. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed supportive of my career goals in a way many men I dated weren't. He worked in financial consulting, always. Busy, always important, always letting me know how lucky I was that he made time for our relationship despite his demanding schedule. I believed him. I believed in us. We married 2 years after meeting, and for the most part, things were good. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our favorite restaurants. We had date nights when his schedule allowed and weekend getaways to my lake house when we both needed to decompress from city life. The lake house was my sanctuary. I had purchased it with my own savings 3 years before meeting Derek, after landing my first executive position. It wasn't extravagant. A 3-bedroom cabin with a wraparound porch and private dock on Cedar Lake, about a 2-hour drive from Chicago. But it was mine. My retreat. My achievement. The deed was in my name. Alone, as I had bought it before marriage and had always paid its expenses from my personal account. Derek claimed to love the place, though he spent more time on conference calls on the porch than actually enjoying the lake. Still, it became our escape, the place where I felt most at peace. That Sunday morning, as Derek casually informed me, he had offered my sanctuary to his sister Megan's family for the entire summer. Something shifted inside me. Not dramatically, not yet. But a small crack formed in the foundation of what I had believed our marriage to be. "You told Megan they could use the lake house without asking me first." I kept my voice level, though inside, a slow burn of anger was building. Derek glanced up from his phone, looking mildly surprised by my question. "It's not a big deal, Jen. They're in a tough spot with the flood damage, and it's not like we live there full-time. We can vacation somewhere else this year." The dismissal stung more than the presumption. 14 years together, and he still didn't understand what that place meant to me. Or perhaps he did, and simply didn't care. I had plans to spend most of July and August there working remotely, I reminded him. "I've already cleared it with the office. You know this." He shrugged, already returning his attention to his phone. "So change your plans. Megan has 3 kids, Jen. They need a stable place to stay while their house is being repaired. It's just sitting empty most of the time anyway. Just sitting empty. As if the lake house were a storage unit rather than my personal retreat. As if my plans, my needs, my property were inconsequential when weighed against his sister's convenience. I could have argued further. I could have raised my voice. demanded he call Megan back immediately to retract the offer. Instead, I simply set down my coffee cup and stood up. "We'll discuss this later," I said quietly, and left the room before I said something I might regret. In our bedroom, I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed, my hands perfectly steady as I took several deep breaths. This wasn't the first time Derek had prioritized his family's needs over mine. It wasn't even the first time he'd made decisions without consulting me. But something about this particular instance felt different, perhaps because it involved something that was unquestionably mine. I reached for my laptop and opened my calendar. I had indeed blocked off 6 weeks of remote work at the lake house, a plan I had shared with Derek months ago. I had meetings scheduled with local clients in the area, had arranged for high-speed internet to be installed to facilitate video conferences, and had even engaged a local cleaning service to come in twice a week. I had planned everything meticulously, as I always did, and Derek had disregarded it all with a casual wave of his hand. As I sat there, I began to recall other incidents over the years. The time Derek committed us to hosting Christmas for his entire extended family, without checking if I had already made plans with my parents. The vacation to Bali that was canceled last minute because Megan needed Derek to co-sign a loan for her new car. The countless dinner reservations changed or canceled to accommodate his family's impromptu visits. Each instance on its own had seemed minor, forgivable. But strung together, they formed a pattern I had been too busy, or perhaps too willfully blind, to recognize. I opened a new browser tab and logged into my personal bank account, the one I had maintained separately from our joint accounts, since before our marriage. The lake house expenses were all clearly categorized: property taxes, utilities, insurance, maintenance, all paid by me, from my earnings. Derek contributed to none of it, had never offered to, though he enjoyed the property as if it were his own. I then logged into our joint account, curious about something I had never bothered to examine closely before. The transaction history revealed a pattern of its own: regular transfers to an account I didn't recognize, always on the 5th of each month, always for $1,500. Going back years. My heart beat a little faster as I noted the account number and then checked our savings account. The balance was considerably lower than I had expected. We both deposited a portion of our salaries into this account each month, ostensibly for future investments and retirement supplements. But the withdrawals didn't match our agreed-upon expenses. I wasn't prone to invasion of privacy, but something told me I needed to understand what I was seeing. I went to Derek's home office, a space I rarely entered out of respect for his work boundaries. His laptop was closed on the desk, but his filing cabinet wasn't locked. I hesitated only briefly before opening the drawer labeled Personal. Inside, I found a folder labeled Megan, Support. With increasingly steady hands, I opened it to discover years of documentation, checks, transfer receipts, loan agreements. Derek had been financially supporting his sister and her family for the entirety of our marriage, to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars annually. The $500 monthly transfers were just the beginning. There were additional lump sums for what appeared to be every crisis in Megan's adult life: car payments, medical bills, school tuition for her children, even the down payment on their house. The very house that was now supposedly flood damaged. I felt no anger as I carefully photographed key documents with my phone, then returned everything exactly as I had found it. Instead, I felt an odd, detached clarity. The pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known I was solving were falling into place. The flood story didn't quite add up. If Megan's house was severely damaged, there would be insurance involvement, possibly a hotel stay covered by the policy. Why would they need our lake house specifically for the entire summer? And why had I not heard anything about this flood directly from Megan, who usually didn't hesitate to share her crises with me in excruciating detail? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Back in our bedroom, I sent a casual text to Megan's husband, Brian. So sorry to hear about the flood damage. How extensive is it? Let me know if I can help with insurance paperwork. Dealt with something similar at the office last year. His reply came quickly and confirmed my growing suspicion. Flood? Our house is fine. Getting ready for that big backyard renovation project, though? Megan's excited about it. So, there was no flood. There was a renovation, likely another expense my husband was secretly financing. And now, apparently, a free summer vacation in my lake house was being added to the package. I set my phone down and stared out the window at the Chicago skyline. I wasn't angry. Not yet. That would come later. In this moment, I felt something shifting fundamentally in how I viewed my marriage, my husband, and most importantly, myself. I had always prided myself on being reasonable, understanding, accommodating. But as I sat there, I began to wonder if those qualities, admirable in the right context, had made me an easy target for the kind of incremental boundary violations that could only be fully appreciated when viewed collectively. Derek knocked on the bedroom door before entering, his expression now conciliatory. Hey, I can tell you're upset about the lake house thing, but it's family, Jen. They need our help. I looked at him, this man I had loved and trusted for 14 years, and saw him with new eyes. When did Megan's house flood? The question clearly caught him off guard. Last week. Tuesday or Wednesday, I think. Why? That's interesting, I said calmly. Because I just texted Brian to offer my help with insurance paperwork, and he seemed confused. He mentioned a planned backyard renovation, but no flood. Derek's face went through a rapid series of expressions: surprise, alarm, calculation, and finally an attempt at indignation. Brian probably doesn't want to worry you with the details. It's pretty bad. I nodded slowly. I see. And this flood, is it being covered by the same insurance that covered the emergency roof repair last year? Or the basement water damage? The year before? Or perhaps it's related to the sudden medical expenses from 3 months ago. His eyes widened slightly. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the $1,300 you transfer to your sister every month, I said quietly. I'm talking about the additional thousands you've given her for every supposed emergency over the past decade. I'm talking about the fact that you've been systematically depleting our joint savings to support your sister's family without ever discussing it with me. Derek's face hardened. You went through my private files? After discovering unexplained transfers from our joint account? Yes, I did, just as you made a unilateral decision about my property without consulting me. Our property, he corrected, automatically. We're married. What's yours is mine. I almost smiled at the irony. Is that also true of our joint savings? Was that mine too, to distribute as I saw fit without your knowledge or consent? He ran a hand through his hair, visibly recalculating his approach. Look, I know I should have discussed the financial support with you. Megan's had a rough time since her divorce, and I was just trying to help. As for the lake house, it's just for one summer. They need a break, and it would mean a lot to them. The ease with which he pivoted from denial to justification was almost impressive. I wondered how many times this exact strategy had worked on me in the past, making me doubt my own reactions, my own feelings. The lake house is not available, I said simply. His expression darkened. Don't be petty, Jennifer. It's my sister. The lake house is mine, Derek, legally and financially. I bought it before we were married. I've maintained it with my own money. And the deed is solely in my name. That's a technicality and you know it, he snapped. We've always treated it as our shared vacation home. Have we? I asked, genuinely curious now. You've never contributed to its upkeep. You've canceled plans to go there countless times. For work, or for your family's needs. and now you're offering it to your sister without even discussing it with me first. That doesn't sound like how people treat shared property." "This is ridiculous," Derek said, his voice rising. "I've already told Megan they can use it. Their kids are excited. I'm not going to call and disappoint them because you're suddenly being territorial." I felt remarkably calm as I stood up. "You're welcome to explain to Megan that you offered something that wasn't yours to give. Or I can call her myself and clarify the situation. But either way, your sister and her family will not be staying at my lake house this summer or any other time without my explicit invitation." Derek stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Perhaps he was. Perhaps the woman he thought he had married, compliant, accommodating, easily managed, had never really existed. Or perhaps she had, but was finally waking up to her own worth. "This isn't like you, Jennifer," he said finally, his tone somewhere between accusatory and bewildered. "No," I agreed. "It isn't. And that's something we both need to think about." I walked past him out of the bedroom, collected my car keys and purse, and headed for the door. I needed space to think, to plan, to decide what came next. "Where are you going?" Derek called after me. "To the lake house," I replied without turning around. "To work, as planned. I suggest you use this time to reconsider what kind of marriage you thought we had, and what kind we actually have." The 2-hour drive to Cedar Lake gave me time to process everything I had discovered. By the time I pulled up to the familiar cabin, with its weathered cedar siding and panoramic view of the water, I had moved beyond shock to strategic thinking. The first thing I did after unlocking the door and setting down my hastily packed bag was call my attorney, Lucia Reyes. We had become friends after working together on several marketing campaigns for her firm, and she specialized in family law. "I need to understand my legal position," I explained after briefly outlining the situation. "The lake house is straightforward," Lucia assured me. "If you purchased it before marriage with your own funds, maintained it separately, and kept it titled solely in your name, it's almost certainly separate property, not marital property. Derek would have a very difficult time claiming any ownership interest. And the money he's been transferring to his sister from our joint account, that's more complicated," she admitted. "Joint accounts are presumed to be marital property. However, if he's been making significant gifts to family members without your knowledge or consent, especially if it represents a substantial portion of the account, you might have a claim for dissipation of marital assets. It would depend on the specific circumstances and documentation." "I have documentation," I assured her. "Years of it." "Good. Keep it secure. And Jennifer, consider changing the locks on the lake house. Not because you legally need to, you don't, but because it sounds like boundaries are being crossed, and a physical reminder sometimes helps reinforce where those boundaries are." After hanging up, I did exactly that. The local hardware store had a locksmith who came out that afternoon to install new locks and provide me with the only keys. I also called a security company to install a basic system with cameras covering the entrance and dock areas. By evening, I had created a detailed spreadsheet documenting every dollar Derek had diverted to his sister over the years, adding up to a staggering total of nearly $300,000. I had also contacted my bank to remove Derek's access to my personal accounts, something I had granted him years ago, in case of emergency, though he had never needed to use it. My phone had been buzzing periodically with texts from Derek, evolving from irritated, "You're overreacting," to concerned, "Can we please talk about this calmly?" to conciliatory, "I should have discussed it with you first. I'm sorry." I responded only once with a simple, "I need time to think. I'll contact you when I'm ready to talk." As the sun set over Cedar Lake, casting long golden reflections across the water, I sat on the dock with a glass of wine and confronted some difficult truths. My marriage was not what I had believed it to be. The partnership I thought we shared was, in many ways, an illusion. one I had participated in creating by consistently prioritizing harmony over honesty, accommodation over self-respect. The question now was whether the relationship could be salvaged, whether new boundaries could be established and honored, whether trust could be rebuilt, or whether, perhaps, it was time to recognize that the marriage, like a house built on a faulty foundation, was fundamentally unsound. My phone rang again, this time with Megan's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, not yet ready for that conversation. Whatever Derek had or hadn't told her about the lake house situation, I needed to be clear on my own position before engaging. The voicemail notification appeared moments later, and curiosity got the better of me. I listened as Megan's voice, artificially bright, filled the quiet evening air. "Jennifer, hi. I just wanted to touch base about the lake house situation. Derek mentioned there might be some confusion. We're so grateful for you both offering us the place for the summer. It's exactly what we need with all the renovation chaos. The kids are already planning their lake activities. Anyway, we were thinking of coming up this weekend to check it out and bring some of our things. Let me know if you'll be there too. Talk soon." I deleted the message, something cold settling in my stomach. There was no acknowledgement of the imposition, no recognition that she was asking to use someone else's property, not even a pretense of a question in her tone. Just entitlement, pure and simple, clothed in effusive gratitude. It was clear from her message that Derek hadn't corrected her understanding of the situation, despite our confrontation. He was either avoiding conflict with his sister, or, more concerning, still planning to override my decision. I sent a brief text to Megan. "There seems to be a misunderstanding. The lake house is not available this summer. I'll call you tomorrow to discuss." Then I turned off my phone, poured another glass of wine, and watched as the stars emerged above the lake, bright points of clarity in the gathering darkness. The next morning, I awoke early and took a long walk along the lake shore. The familiar paths, the scent of pine, the occasional splash of fish jumping in the shallows, all of it helped clear my head. By the time I returned to the cabin, I had formulated a plan. I turned my phone back on to find multiple missed calls and messages from both Derek and Megan. Derek's messages had evolved into frustration. "You're embarrassing me with my own family." And then accusations. "You're being selfish and unreasonable." Megan's single text message was considerably less friendly than her voicemail. "Derek says you're being difficult about the lake house. We really need this, Jennifer. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I ignored them all, and instead called my office to confirm my remote work arrangement for the summer. Then I called a locksmith in Chicago to change the locks on our home there as well, not to lock Derek out permanently, but to ensure I had control over who had access to my space while I figured out next steps. Finally, I called Derek. "Where have you been?" he demanded as soon as he picked up. "I've been trying to reach you all night. Megan is upset. This whole situation is getting out of hand." "I turned off my phone because I needed time to think," I said calmly. "And yes, the situation is out of hand, but not for the reasons you seem to think. Look, I understand you're angry that I didn't discuss the lake house with you first. That was wrong, and I apologize. But making Megan and her family suffer because you're upset with me isn't fair." His attempt to reframe the situation as me punishing his sister rather than simply maintaining my boundaries was so transparent it was almost laughable. Almost. This isn't about punishing anyone, Derek. This is about respecting ownership and boundaries. The lake house is mine. I decide who uses it and when. You're being... Let me finish, I interrupted, surprised by my own firmness. I've discovered that you've been financially supporting your sister and her family for years without my knowledge, using our joint funds. You've made unilateral decisions about significant sums of money that belong to both of us, and now you're attempting to make unilateral decisions about property that belongs solely to me. These are serious breaches of trust. Silence stretched between us for several seconds before he responded, his tone now careful. I can see how you might feel that way, but my intentions were good, Jennifer. Megan needed help. She still does. Then help her with your own resources, I suggested, not with mine. That's cold, he said, a note of genuine surprise in his voice. I thought you cared about my family. I do care about your family, but caring about them doesn't mean I'm obligated to provide for them financially or give them free access to my property, especially not without being consulted first. So what now? He asked. Are you actually going to force Megan to find another place for the summer just to prove a point? I'm not proving a point, Derek. I'm establishing a boundary. And yes, Megan will need to make other arrangements. I've already informed her that the lake house is not available. His sharp intake of breath told me he hadn't expected me to contact Megan directly. You had no right to do that without talking to me first. The irony of his statement was apparently lost on him. I had every right, I corrected him. It's my property, and it was my responsibility to clarify the situation you created by making promises you had no authority to make. This is ridiculous, he muttered. I don't even recognize you right now. I'm beginning to feel the same way about you, I replied honestly. We need to have a serious conversation about our marriage, Derek. About respect, trust, and partnership. But first, I need some space. I'll be staying at the lake house for the next week at least. I suggest you use this time to reflect on what kind of relationship you actually want, because the one we've been living isn't working for me anymore. I ended the call before he could respond, feeling both drained and strangely empowered. It was perhaps the first time in our marriage that I had directly confronted Derek about his behavior without tempering my position or offering immediate reconciliation. A text message arrived from Megan moments later. Derek says you're insisting on keeping the lake house to yourself this summer. After everything we've done for you over the years, this is how you repay us? Selfish doesn't even begin to cover. First, I stared at the message, genuinely perplexed by what she meant by everything we've done for you. As far as I could recall, the support had always flowed in one direction, from us to them. But perspective is a powerful thing, and I suspected Megan had constructed a narrative that cast her as the generous one and me as the perpetual beneficiary. Rather than engaging in a text argument, I decided to call her directly. She answered on the first ring. I hope you're calling to say you've reconsidered, she said by way of greeting. No, Megan. I'm calling to make sure we understand each other clearly, I replied. The lake house is not available for you and your family this summer. I'm staying here myself, as I had planned months ago. But Derek promised something that wasn't his to offer, I interrupted gently. The lake house is legally mine. I purchased it before we were married, and I've maintained it with my own funds since then. That's just a technicality, she said, echoing Derek's words almost exactly. Your family. Family helps each other. Yes, family does help each other, I agreed. And Derek has been helping you quite generously for years. But family also respects boundaries and doesn't make assumptions about other people's property. Her tone hardened. So that's it? You're just going to leave us scrambling for a place to stay during our renovation? From what I understand, the renovation is planned, not an emergency. I'm sure you've made contingency plans, but if not, there are many rental properties in your area that would be more convenient for Brian's work commute than a lake house 2 hours away. We can't afford... She stopped abruptly, perhaps realizing what she had been about to admit. Can't afford what, Megan? I pressed. Nothing, she said quickly. This isn't about money. It's about you suddenly being territorial over a vacation home that sits empty most of the year anyway. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that anger wouldn't help this situation. I understand you're disappointed, but my decision is final. I hope your renovation goes smoothly. I ended the call and turned back to the calm waters of the lake, wondering how many more difficult conversations lay ahead, and whether my marriage would survive them. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something like peace. The kind that comes not from avoiding conflict, but from standing firmly in your own truth. 3 days passed with minimal communication from Derek, though Megan continued to send occasional texts alternating between guilt trips and thinly veiled demands. I ignored them all, focusing instead on work and on the small repairs and improvements the lake house needed after the winter. On the 4th day, just as I was settling into a productive routine, I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. Through the front window, I saw Derek's car pull up, followed by another vehicle I recognized as Megan's SUV. My heart rate quickened, but I remained calm as I stepped onto the porch to meet them, deliberately closing and locking the door behind me. Derek emerged from his car first, his expression a mixture of determination and apprehension. Megan followed, along with Brian and their 3 children, who immediately ran toward the lake, excited. "What is this?" I asked, my voice steady despite the anger rising within me. Derek approached the porch steps but didn't climb them. "We need to talk, Jennifer. All of us. This situation has gotten out of hand." "The situation was clear," I replied. "The lake house is not available. Yet here you all are, with luggage." I gestured to the bags visible in both vehicles. Megan stepped forward. "Derek said we could work this out in person. The kids are already excited about spending the summer here, and it seems selfish to disappoint them because of some legal technicality." I looked at her, then at Derek, understanding washing over me. "You told them to come anyway, didn't you? Despite everything I said, you thought if you just showed up with everyone, I'd give in rather than cause a scene." Derek had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I thought if we could all talk face to face, we could find a compromise. Maybe share the house or—" "No," I interrupted, my voice firm. "There is no compromise here. This is my property, and I've made my decision clear. You need to leave." Megan's face flushed with anger. "You can't be serious. We drove all the way here with the kids. We've packed for the summer." "I'm completely serious," I replied. "And I'm disappointed that Derek led you to believe otherwise." I turned to Brian, who had been hanging back, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Brian, I'm sorry you and the children were dragged into this, but I've been clear from the beginning. The lake house is not available." Brian nodded, seemingly unsurprised. "Kids," he called out, "come back to the car. We need to go." "But Dad!" came the chorus of protests from the shoreline. "Now," he said firmly, then turned to Megan. "I told you this was a bad idea. Let's go." Megan looked at Derek, panic crossing her face. "Do something," she hissed. Derek climbed the porch steps, lowering his voice. "Jennifer, please. Just for tonight at least. They've come all this way." I shook my head. "This was manipulative, Derek. You deliberately ignored my clearly stated boundaries and brought them here anyway, thinking I'd be too uncomfortable to stand my ground in person. That shows a profound lack of respect for me, and for my decision." "It's not just about you," he snapped, finally losing his composure. "It's about family. It's about helping people who need it. Why are you being so selfish?" "Selfish?" I repeated quietly. "Is that how you see it? I've spent years supporting your sister financially through our joint accounts without complaint, because I didn't know it was happening. And now that I'm simply asserting my right to my own property, I'm selfish?" Derek ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Look, I know I should have told you about the money. That was wrong. But this is different. This is just a house." "It's not just a house to me," I said. "It's my sanctuary. It's the place I come to work, to think, to be myself. And the fact that you can't understand that you would trample over my feelings and my rights this way, tells me everything I need to know about how you view me and our marriage." Movement caught my eye. Brian was hurting the disappointed. Children back to their SUV while Megan stood with arms crossed, glaring at me. "You need to leave," I said to Derek. "All of you. We can discuss our marriage when you're ready to have an honest conversation about respect and boundaries. But that conversation will be just between us, not with your sister present." Derek stared at me for a long moment, as if seeing a stranger. "I don't know what's gotten into you," he said finally. "This isn't the woman I married." "Perhaps you never really knew the woman you married," I replied softly. "Or perhaps she finally realized she deserves better than being disregarded and disrespected by the man who promised to cherish her." He turned and walked back to his car without another word. I watched as both vehicles backed out of the driveway, Megan still visibly fuming, the children's disappointed faces pressed against the windows of the SUV. Once they were gone, I sat heavily on the porch steps, trembling slightly as the adrenaline ebbed. I had stood my ground, had refused to be manipulated or guilted into giving up my space. It felt both terrible and liberating. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "This isn't over. We need to talk about the lake house and about us. I'll be at home when you're ready to be reasonable." I didn't respond. Instead, I called the security company to expedite the installation scheduled for the following day. Then I called Lucia. "They showed up at the lake house," I told her. "Derek, Megan, her husband, their kids, with luggage, expecting to stay for the summer despite everything I said." "That's unacceptable," Lucia said, her voice reflecting my own outrage. "But unsurprising, given the pattern you've described. This is about control, Jennifer. Derek is used to making decisions and having you accept them. He's not prepared for you to assert your independence." "What do I do now?" I asked. "Exactly what you're doing. Hold your boundaries firmly. Document everything. And I think we should schedule a formal consultation about your options moving forward, whether that means restructuring your finances to protect yourself while working on the marriage or considering separation." The word separation hung in the air, both frightening and oddly calming. For the first time, I allowed myself to truly consider whether this marriage was salvageable or whether the I patterns were too deeply entrenched to change. "Yes," I said finally, "let's do that. I need to understand all my options." As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The confrontation had been painful, but it had also burned away any illusions I might have still harbored about the nature of my relationship with Derek. He had shown me exactly who he was and how he viewed me. Now I had to decide what to do with that knowledge. The security system was installed the next day. Cameras, motion sensors, and a new electronic lock that could be controlled remotely. I gave the security company explicit instructions about who was and wasn't permitted access to the property. Derek called twice that day. I let both calls go to voicemail. His messages were a study in manipulation tactics. First anger, "You embarrassed me in front of my family." Then appeals to my better nature. Megan's kids were devastated, followed by attempts to minimize the issue. "It's just a house, not worth destroying our marriage over." And finally, grudging contrition. "I should have respected your decision, but we need to talk about this face to face." I listened to each message carefully, hearing not just the words but the assumptions behind them. The underlying belief that my boundaries were negotiable, that my feelings were less important than his or his sister's needs, that confronting me in person would make me more likely to bend to his will. On the third day, I received an unexpected text from Brian. "I want to apologize for the lake house situation. Megan insisted we come despite my objections. I should have stood my ground. For what it's worth, I've told her we need to respect your decision and make other arrangements." The message surprised me. Brian had always seemed like a passive participant in Megan's demands, going along to keep the peace rather than asserting his own opinions. Perhaps he too was beginning to recognize unhealthy patterns in his relationship. I replied simply, "Thank you for that, Brian. I appreciate your understanding." The fourth day brought a certified letter from Derek, an unexpected and somewhat dramatic move. Inside was a 5-page handwritten letter, detailing his perspective on our marriage, the lake house situation, and his financial support of Megan. He acknowledged that he should have been transparent about the money, but justified it as necessary support for his struggling sister. He admitted that offering the lake house without consulting me was wrong, but argued that my reaction was disproportionate to the offense. He expressed concern about the sudden change in my personality and suggested marriage counseling to help me work through my unexpected issues with generosity and family loyalty. The letter was a masterpiece of subtle blame-shifting, framing me as the unreasonable party while positioning himself as the concerned, loving husband trying to help his troubled wife see reason. I read it twice, marveling at how thoroughly it missed the point of my objections while appearing on the surface to address them. I didn't respond to the letter. Instead, I called a therapist a colleague had recommended and scheduled an appointment. Not because I believed Derek's suggestion that I was the one with issues to work through, but because I knew I would need support navigating the complex emotions and decisions that lay ahead. On the 5th day, I drove back to Chicago, not to return home, but to meet with Lucia in her office. I brought copies of all the financial documentation I had gathered, along with the spreadsheet detailing the money Derek had diverted to Megan over the years. "Based on what you've shown me," Lucia said after reviewing the documents, "you have a strong case for dissipation of marital assets if you decide to pursue divorce. The amount he's given his sister without your knowledge or consent is substantial, and the pattern of deception is clear." "And if I want to try to save the marriage?" I asked, still not entirely sure where I stood on that question. "Then I'd recommend a post-nuptial agreement clearly defining separate and marital property, along with strict guidelines for future financial decisions." But Jennifer, I have to be honest, the patterns you're describing go beyond financial issues. They speak to fundamental problems with respect and equality in your relationship. I nodded, having come to the same conclusion myself. "I know. I just need to be sure I've considered all options before making any final decisions." "Of course," Lucia said gently. "Take your time, but protect yourself in the meantime." After leaving Lucia's office, I drove past our brownstone, slowing as I approached. Derek's car was in the driveway, and through the front window, I could see movement inside. Part of me wanted to stop, to walk in and confront him directly about everything I had discovered and realized over the past week. But I wasn't ready, yet. I needed more time to strengthen my resolve, to clarify my own needs and boundaries before engaging in what would undoubtedly be an emotionally charged conversation. I continued driving, heading back toward the lake house, toward the space that was unquestionably mine, the place where I could think clearly without the weight of Derek's expectations and manipulations pressing down on me. As I drove, I reflected on the strange journey of the past week. What had begun as a simple boundary assertion about my property had evolved into a fundamental reassessment of my marriage and my own identity within it. The lake house had become more than just a piece of real estate. It was now a symbol of my independence, my self-respect, and my refusal to be diminished any longer. I didn't know yet whether Derek and I would find a way forward together, or whether our paths would ultimately diverge. But I did know, with a certainty that felt both painful and liberating, that I would never again allow anyone to make me feel small or inconsequential in my own life. The lake house awaited, its weathered porch and tranquil shoreline promising refuge and clarity. Whatever came next, I would face it on my terms, standing firmly in the knowledge of my own worth. 1 week after my discovery of Derek's financial betrayal, I sat at the weathered wooden desk in the lake house, staring at my laptop screen. I'd created a comprehensive spreadsheet detailing every transaction from our joint accounts to Megan over the past decade. The total was staggering, over $320,000. Money that could have funded our retirement, renovations to our Chicago home, or countless other shared dreams we'd discussed but always seemed just out of financial reach. I'd stopped answering Derek's calls 3 days ago. His messages had evolved from defensive justifications to emotional manipulation, and finally to thinly veiled threats about legal action regarding the lake house. I forwarded each message to Lucia without responding. Today was different. ID. Woken with a strange sense of calm determination, knowing exactly what needed to happen next, I picked up my phone and called my husband. "Jennifer," he answered immediately, his voice a mixture of relief and wariness. "Finally, we need to talk about this." "Yes, we do," I agreed, "but not over the phone. I'd like you to come to the, lake house tomorrow, alone." There was a pause. "Alone? You don't want Megan there to work this out together?" The fact that he would even suggest bringing his sister to discuss our marital issues confirmed everything I'd been realizing over the past week. "This is between us, Derek. Our marriage, our finances, our future. Megan isn't part of that conversation." He sighed. "Fine. What time?" "Noon. And Derek, I mean it. Come alone. If anyone else shows up with you, I won't open the door." After hanging up, I called Lucia to update her on the planned meeting. "Are you sure you're ready for this confrontation?" she asked. "I am," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "I need to look him in the eye when I present what I've found. I need to hear his explanations without filters or time to craft responses. And I need to make it clear that things cannot continue as they have been." "Do you know what outcome you're hoping for?" I paused, considering the question. "Clarity," I said finally. "Whether that means a complete restructuring of our relationship or the end of it, I need the truth, from him and from myself." "Call me afterward," Lucia said. "And remember, you've done nothing wrong by protecting yourself." The next morning, I prepared the lake house meticulously. I set 2 chairs facing each other on the porch overlooking the water. I printed copies of the financial records, organized in a folder. I wore a simple blue dress that had always made me feel confident, and for the first time in days, I applied makeup and styled my hair, not for Derek's benefit, but for my own. At precisely noon, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Derek's silver Audi pulled into the driveway, and I watched through the window as he sat there for several moments before finally emerging. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes more pronounced than usual, his normally impeccable appearance slightly rumpled. I stepped onto the porch as he approached, gesturing to the chairs I'd arranged. "Thank you for coming," I said formally, as if greeting a business associate rather than my husband of 12 years. He sat down, his eyes scanning my face. "You look good," he said, an edge of confusion in his voice. Perhaps he'd expected me to be falling apart without him. "I've had time to think," I replied, taking the seat across from him. "And to research." I opened the folder and handed him the first document, a summary of all the transfers from our joint accounts to Megan. "Over $300,000, Derek," I said quietly as he scanned the page. "That's how much you've given your sister from our joint finances without discussing it with me." He looked up, his expression hardening. "You make it sound like I was stealing. She's my sister. She needed help." "I don't dispute that you were helping your sister. What I take issue with is the secrecy, the lies, and the unilateral decisions about shared resources." I leaned forward slightly. "Were you ever going to tell me?" He shifted uncomfortably. "It never seemed like the right time. You're so careful with money, so focused on saving. I knew you'd object to the amounts. So instead of having an adult conversation with your wife about a significant financial commitment, you decided to lie by omission for our entire marriage?" "I didn't lie," he countered defensively. "I just managed it privately." "And the fictional emergencies? The roof repair? The medical expenses? The basement flooding? Were those managed privately too? Or were they outright fabrications?" A flush crept up his neck. "Megan did need help with those things. I may have emphasized the urgency to avoid lengthy discussions." I nodded, taking in his admission. "And the lake house? Was that your idea or hers?" "Hers initially," he admitted. "She mentioned wanting a vacation place for the summer, somewhere the kids could swim. I thought it would be a nice thing to offer, without asking me. Yes, he said, a flash of irritation crossing his face. Without asking you. Because sometimes, Jennifer, you can be rigid, ungenerous. Everything has to be on your terms, according to your plans. I felt a flare of anger but kept my voice steady. Is that how you see me? As rigid and ungenerous? Not always, he backpedaled slightly. But when it comes to certain things, like this house, yes. You've always been territorial about it, even though we're married and should share everything. This house is legally mine, Derek. I purchased it with my own money before we were married. I've maintained it with my separate funds. You've contributed nothing to it financially, yet you felt entitled to offer it to your sister without even a conversation. Because that's what family does, he exclaimed, frustration evident in his voice. They share. They help each other without keeping score. Is that what you were doing with the money too? Not keeping score? Because I have the exact amounts. Right here. I tapped the folder. Down to the penny. He ran a hand through his hair. You're twisting this, making it sound calculated and cold when it was just me helping my sister through tough times. And hiding it from your wife. I paused, gathering my thoughts. Here's what I find most telling, Derek. When I confronted you about the lake house, your first instinct wasn't to acknowledge my feelings or recognize that you'd overstepped. It was to double down, to bring Megan and her family here against my explicit wishes, to try to manipulate me through social pressure and guilt. That's not fair. I thought if we could all talk in person. You thought if I was faced with disappointed children and family pressure, I'd give in rather than stand my ground, I interrupted. You weren't seeking understanding. You were looking for a way to override my decision. He fell silent, perhaps recognizing the truth in my words. I want to ask you something, I said after a moment. If the situation were reversed, if I had been secretly diverting hundreds of thousands of dollars from our joint accounts to support my brother without telling you, and then offered your personal property to him without asking, how would you feel? Derek looked out at the lake, avoiding my gaze. That's different. Why? Because it's you doing it, not me? Because Megan really needs the help, he insisted. Your brother is doing fine. That's not the point, and I think you know it, I said gently. The point is respect, Derek. Respect for me as your partner. Respect for my property. Respect for my right to be included in major decisions that affect us both. He turned back to me, his expression hardening. So what now? What do you want? A divorce because I helped my sister? Because I offered her a few weeks in a house that sits empty most of the year anyway? I studied him, this man I had loved, and built a life with, trying to see past my hurt to the core of who he truly was. What I saw saddened me, not anger at his actions, but a fundamental inability to recognize or acknowledge the damage he'd done. What I want, I said carefully, is to understand whether this marriage can be saved, whether you recognize the seriousness of the breach of trust, and whether you're willing to do the work to rebuild it. Of course I want to save our marriage, he said quickly. But I need you to be reasonable about this. Megan is my sister. I can't just cut her off. And the lake house is not available to her, I finished firmly. Not now, not this summer, not until or unless I decide otherwise. That's non-negotiable, Derek. His jaw tightened. And the financial support? That needs to stop coming from our joint accounts effective immediately. If you want to help Megan from your personal funds, that's your decision. But no more secret transfers. No more lies about emergencies. No more depleting our shared resources without my knowledge or consent. You're really going to make me choose between helping my sister and making you happy? He asked incredulously. No, I corrected him. I'm asking you to choose between deception and honesty, between making unilateral decisions about our shared life and being a true partner. He was silent for a long time, staring out at the gentle waves lapping at the shore. Finally, he turned back to me. "I don't know if I can be who you're asking me to be, Jennifer." The words hung between us, honest in a way much of our relationship hadn't been. I felt a strange mixture of pain and relief at his admission. "Thank you for that truth," I said quietly. "It's a starting point at least." "What does that mean for us?" he asked, vulnerability replacing the defensiveness in his voice. "It means we have decisions to make. Difficult ones." I closed the folder and set it aside. "I've scheduled an appointment with a marriage counselor for next week. If you're willing to try to really examine these patterns and work to change them, I'd like you to join me. And if I don't?" I met his gaze steadily. "Then I think we both know where this leads." He nodded slowly, the reality of our situation seeming to settle over him. "I need time to think." "I understand. So do I." I stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. "Let me know your decision about counseling by Friday." As Derek walked back to his car, shoulders slightly slumped, I felt no triumph, no vindication. Only a quiet certainty that whatever happened next, I had finally found my voice and the courage to use it. The next few days passed in a strange limbo. I continued working remotely from the lake house, finding solace in the familiar rhythm of client calls and marketing strategies. Derek texted once to ask for the details of the counseling appointment, which I provided without additional comment. On Thursday evening, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. When I answered, a male voice I didn't immediately recognize spoke. "Jennifer, it's Brian, Megan's husband." I tensed, expecting another guilt trip about the lake house. "Hello, Brian." "I wanted to call and apologize," he said, surprising me, "for the way Megan and Derek have been handling this situation, and for my part in showing up at your property uninvited. That wasn't right." I sat down on the porch steps, taken aback by his unexpected call. "Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that." "There's something else you should know," he continued, his voice lower now, as if ensuring he wouldn't be overheard. "This has been going on for years. Derek swooping in to solve Megan's problems, enabling her spending habits. I've tried to put my foot down about it, but it's easier to accept the help," I finished for him. "Yes," he admitted. "And Derek's always been so insistent, making us feel like we'd be insulting him if we refused. But after what happened at the lake house, seeing how he disregarded your feelings completely, it made me realize I've been complicit in something unhealthy for a long time." I found myself warming to Brian in a way I never had before. It's a difficult position to be in. "I've told Megan we're not taking any more money from Derek," he said firmly. "We're canceling the backyard renovation, and I've set up a meeting with a financial advisor to help us live within our actual means." "How did she take that?" He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Not well. She's furious with me. But I realized I've been letting this dynamic undermine our marriage for years, and it needs to stop." After we hung up, I sat watching the sunset over the lake, reflecting on Brian's call. It seemed the lake house confrontation had served as a wake-up call not just for me, but for him as well. Two marriages in crisis, both impacted by the same unhealthy patterns of dependency and enabling. Friday morning, I awoke to an email from Derek. My heart raced as I opened it, expecting either a confirmation about counseling or perhaps a legal threat concerning the lake house. Instead, I found a lengthy, thoughtful message that caught me completely off guard. "Jennifer, I've been doing a lot of thinking since our conversation at the lake house. My first instinct was to defend myself, to justify my actions, to paint myself as the good brother just trying to help his sister. But after some honest soul-searching, I've come to realize some uncomfortable truths. The way I've handled the situation with Megan hasn't just been dishonest to you. It's been ultimately unhelpful to her. By secretly funding her lifestyle and solving her problems for years, I've enabled behaviors that have prevented her from becoming financially independent. And I've done it at the expense of our marriage, our trust, and our shared future. I think I've always seen myself as the protector, the provider, the one who fixes everything. It gave me a sense of importance, of control. And if I'm being completely honest, I enjoyed having Megan dependent on me. It made me feel needed in a way that our partnership didn't, because you've always been so capable and independent. I recognize now how deeply I've betrayed your trust, not just with the lake house incident, but with years of financial deception. I am willing to attend counseling, but more than that, I'm willing to do the difficult work of examining these patterns and changing them. I've already spoken to Megan. I told her that I will no longer be providing financial support beyond what we explicitly agreed to as a couple. As you can imagine, she didn't take it well. She accused me of abandoning her, of choosing you over family. It was painful, but it also showed me just how unhealthy our dynamic has become. I don't know if our marriage can recover from this breach of trust. I don't know if you can forgive me or if I can become the partner you deserve. But I want to try. The counseling appointment is in my calendar. I'll be there. Derek. I read the email 3 times, searching for the manipulative undertones I'd come to expect, the subtle blame-shifting or emotional pressure. But I found none. For perhaps the first time in our marriage, Derek seemed to be speaking with complete honesty about himself, about Megan, about us. I closed my laptop without responding, needing time to process this unexpected development. Was this a genuine epiphany or another tactic to regain control of the situation? Could people really change such ingrained patterns of behavior? And even if Derek was sincere in his desire to change, was it too late for our marriage? I spent the day by the lake, swimming, walking, thinking. By evening, I had composed a response. Derek, thank you for your honesty. It can't have been easy to confront these truths about yourself and your relationship with Megan. I appreciate your willingness to attend counseling and to examine these patterns. It's a necessary first step, but only that, a first step. Rebuilding. Trust will require consistent action over time, not just words or temporary changes. I'm not ready to make any decisions about our future yet. I need to see whether the insights you've shared translate into meaningful, lasting change. But I am willing to begin that process with you. I'll see you at the counseling appointment. Jennifer. The weekend passed quietly. Megan called twice, but I let the calls go to voicemail. Her messages were less demanding now, more wounded, painting herself as the victim of Derek's sudden change of heart. I deleted them without responding. On Monday morning, I received an unexpected email from my boss. A major client was hosting an emergency strategy session in New York on Wednesday, the same day as the scheduled counseling appointment. My presence was requested, and given the client's importance to the agency, refusal wasn't really an option. I called Derek immediately. I need to reschedule the counseling appointment, I explained. Work emergency in New York. I can be back by Friday if that works for the therapist. Of course, he said, his tone carefully neutral. I'll call and check availability. An hour later, he texted to confirm a new appointment for Friday afternoon. Then, unexpectedly, he added, "Would it help if I collected your mail and watered?" Your plants while you're in New York? No pressure, just offering. The simple gesture, acknowledging my space and asking permission rather than assuming, caught me off guard. That would be helpful, thank you, I replied. The New York trip was a whirlwind of meetings and strategy sessions. I threw myself into the work, grateful for the distraction from my personal life. The client was facing a major PR crisis, and developing an effective response plan required all my focus and creativity. On Wednesday evening, as I returned to my hotel room exhausted, I received a text from Derek. Hope your meetings are going well. Just wanted to let you know I've hired a financial advisor to help create a plan for untangling Megan's finances from ours. Also, the lake house plants are thriving. I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. It was thoughtful, respectful, of boundaries, and indicated concrete action rather than just words. Was this the beginning of real change, or another form of manipulation? "Thank you," I replied simply. "The meetings are productive but draining. See you Friday." By the time I returned to Chicago on Friday morning, I felt both physically tired and emotionally stronger. The distance and focus on work had given me perspective. Whatever happened with Derek and our marriage, I knew I would be all right. I had my career, my independence, my sense of self-worth. The lake house symbolized all of that, a tangible reminder that I had built something valuable on my own. I drove directly from the airport to the therapist's office, arriving a few minutes before our scheduled appointment. Derek was already there, sitting in the waiting room with a manila folder in his hands. "Good trip?" he asked as I sat down beside him. "Productive," I nodded. "What's in the folder?" "Financial records," he said. "Full transparency about what I've given Megan over the years, the state of our accounts, and the plan the financial advisor has suggested for moving forward. I thought it might be useful for the session." Before I could respond, the therapist, Dr. Elaine Carter, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner, opened her office door and invited us in. The next 90 minutes were among the most difficult and illuminating of my life. Dr. Carter created a space where both Derek and I could speak openly about our perceptions, expectations, and disappointments. She didn't allow either of us to deflect or minimize, insisting on direct engagement with the issues at hand. "Derek," she said at one point, "when you made decisions about joint finances without Jennifer's knowledge or consent, what need were you meeting for yourself?" He was silent for a long moment, genuinely considering the question. "I think I needed to feel important, in control, the provider. When I solve Megan's problems, she looks at me like I'm her hero. Jennifer doesn't need me that way. She's always been self-sufficient. And Jennifer," Dr. Carter turned to me, "when you discovered Derek's financial support of his sister, what hurt you the most?" I found myself answering honestly, without the protective layer of calm I'd been maintaining. The deception. The fact that for years he was making these significant decisions without me, as if my opinion didn't matter, as if I wasn't really his partner. By the end of the session, we had barely scratched the surface of our issues, but something important had shifted. We had both spoken truths that had long gone unacknowledged, and more importantly, we had both truly listened. As we walked to our cars afterward, Derek turned to me. "Would you consider having dinner, just to talk more about what came up today?" I hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but not at home. Somewhere neutral." We chose a quiet Italian restaurant we had frequented in the early years of our relationship. Over pasta and wine, we continued the conversation from therapy, speaking more freely than we had in years. "I've been thinking about what Dr. Carter said," Derek admitted, "about how I've used helping Megan as a way to feel needed and in control. It's uncomfortable to recognize that pattern in myself. And I've been reflecting on what she said about my need for control," I replied. "About how I've perhaps held onto the lake house so tightly, not just because it's mine legally, but because it's the one space where I have complete autonomy." He nodded thoughtfully. "I think that's fair. I've never really understood what that place means to you, beyond just a vacation spot." "It's the first major thing I achieved completely on my own," I explained. "After years of working my way up, saving every penny, it was tangible proof that I could build something for myself. When you offered it to Megan without asking me, it felt like you were dismissing not just the property, but everything it represents to me." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "I never saw it that way. I just saw a house that could help my sister." "I know," I said softly, "and that's part of the problem. You didn't see me." He reached across the table, not quite touching my hand, but close. "I want to see you now, Jennifer. I want to try." As we finished our meal, I felt neither the sharp pain of recent weeks nor the automatic forgiveness that had characterized so much of our marriage. Instead, I felt something more measured, more cautious, but also more honest. A willingness to explore whether what was broken could be repaired. "I'm going back to the lake house tomorrow," I told him as we walked to our cars. "I need space to think, to process everything that's happened." He nodded, accepting this without argument. "I understand. Will you let me know when you're ready to talk more?" "I will," I promised. "And Derek, thank you for showing up today. For really showing up." As I drove away, I realized that this was just the beginning of a long, uncertain journey. Whether it led to reconciliation or separation, I had already gained something invaluable: my voice, my boundaries, and the knowledge that I would never again allow anyone to make me feel insignificant in my own life. The lake house awaited, not just as a sanctuary now, but as a reminder of who I was and what I was capable of. Whatever happened next, I would face it standing firmly in that truth. 3 weeks had passed since Derek and I sat face to face on the lake house porch, discussing the future of our marriage. We'd attended 4 counseling sessions with Dr. Carter, each one peeling back another layer of our relationship dynamics. The process was exhausting, illuminating, and occasionally surprisingly hopeful. Derek had agreed to all my conditions. He'd stopped financial support to Megan from our joint accounts, scheduled regular sessions with his own therapist to explore his enabling patterns, and maintained a respectful distance from the lake house, visiting only when invited. Megan's reaction had been less than gracious. After a week of increasingly hostile messages to both Derek and me, she'd shown up at our Chicago home unannounced, demanding to speak with her brother. I'd been working late, so Derek had faced her alone. A conversation he later described as the hardest thing I've ever done. According to Derek, Megan had cycled through tears, rage, and manipulation, alternately begging for help and accusing him of abandoning his family. When emotional appeals failed, she'd resorted to threats, claiming she would tell their parents and extended family how he had cut her off without warning, after promising to always take care of her. To his credit, Derek had maintained his boundaries. He'd explained that while he loved her, the financial support had become unhealthy for everyone involved. He'd offered to help her find financial counseling and develop a budget within her means, but made it clear that the endless flow of money was over. She'd left in tears, refusing his offer of constructive help. It was a Sunday morning when everything changed. I was at the lake house alone, having decided to spend the weekend working on a marketing pitch for a new client. Derek had planned to join me later that day. Our first overnight stay together at the lake house since our confrontation. I was on the dock with my morning coffee when a familiar SUV pulled into the driveway. My stomach tightened as I recognized Megan's vehicle. Putting down my mug, I walked calmly toward the house, determined to maintain the boundaries we'd established. Megan emerged from the driver's side, and to my surprise, Brian stepped out from the passenger seat. No children accompanied them. Brian's expression was grim, while Megan looked nervous but determined. "Jennifer," she called out as I approached. "We need to talk." "Megan, Brian," I acknowledged with a nod. "I wasn't expecting you." "I know," Megan said, her voice lacking its usual demanding tone. "I should have called first, but I was afraid you wouldn't agree to see me." I studied her for a moment. Something was different. A humility I'd never seen before, an absence of the entitlement that typically characterized our interactions. "What's this about?" I asked, remaining on the porch steps, unwilling to invite them inside just yet. Brian stepped forward. "We owe you an apology, Jennifer. Both of us, but especially Megan." He glanced at his wife, who nodded slightly. "May we sit?" Megan asked, gesturing to the porch chairs. "Please, I promise this isn't a trick or an attempt to change your mind about the lake house." Curiosity overcame caution, and I nodded. "All right, we can talk out here." Once seated, an awkward silence fell between us. Megan fidgeted with her purse strap, while Brian sat steadily beside her, occasionally patting her hand encouragingly. "I've been seeing a therapist," Megan finally blurted out, "for the past 2 weeks. Brian insisted after everything that happened." This was unexpected. "I see," I said neutrally, waiting for her to continue. "She asked me questions no one's ever asked before," Megan continued, "about why I keep needing financial help, why I can't seem to live within our means, why I expect Derek to solve all my problems." She took a deep breath. "And about why I felt entitled to your lake house without even asking properly." I remained silent, sensing she had more to say. "The truth is," she continued, her voice cracking slightly, "I've been jealous of you for years. Of your career, your independence, this beautiful place you bought yourself." She gestured around, at the lake house. "Derek always talked about how successful you were, how you never needed rescuing or fixing. I think I wanted to. I don't know, take something of yours. Prove I could have the things you have, even if I hadn't earned them." The raw honesty stunned me. In all our years as in-laws, Megan had never revealed such vulnerability. "When Derek cut off the financial support," Brian added, "it forced us to really look at our situation. We were completely dependent, living beyond our means because we always knew Derek would bail us out. It wasn't healthy for any of us." "It wasn't," I agreed quietly, "but I appreciate your honesty now." Megan wiped away a tear. "I came to apologize, Jennifer, for the way I've treated you, for the assumptions I made about your property, for the things I said when you refused to let us use the lake house." She met my gaze directly. "You were right to stand your ground. This is your place. You earned it, and I had no right to it." I felt an unexpected softening toward her. Not forgiveness exactly, but appreciation for the difficulty of this admission. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." "There's something else," Brian said, glancing at Megan for confirmation. "We've made some decisions about our future. I've taken a job in Minneapolis. Better pay, better opportunities. We're selling our house and downsizing to something we can actually afford. No more renovations we can't pay for, no more lifestyle we haven't earned." "It's terrifying," Megan admitted, "but also freeing in a way. For the first time, we're standing on our own feet, taking responsibility." I smiled, genuinely pleased for them. "That's a big step. I wish you both well with it." "We wanted you to know," Megan continued, "that we understand why you did what you did. It wasn't just about the lake house. It was about respect, about boundaries. Things I've never been very good at." She paused. "I hope someday we might have a better relationship. Not as people who are connected through Derek, but as, I don't know, maybe friends eventually? If that's even possible." The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. Whatever therapeutic journey she'd begun, it seemed to be yielding real insights. "I think that's possible," I said carefully. "With time, and with continued honesty like this." We talked for another hour, not about the past grievances, but about their plans for Minneapolis, about the therapy both couples were undertaking, about the painful but necessary growth we were all experiencing. When they finally left, with promises to keep in touch about their move, I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I called Derek immediately. "Megan and Brian just left the lake house," I told him when he answered. "What?" His voice tensed with alarm. "I had no idea they were coming. I swear, Jennifer, I didn't—" "I know," I interrupted gently. "This wasn't about you. They came to apologize. to explain some changes they're making in their lives. Apologize? He sounded genuinely surprised. Megan actually apologized? She did. It seems therapy is helping her recognize some patterns, just as it's helping us. I paused. They're moving to Minneapolis. Brian took a new job. They're downsizing, trying to live within their means. Silence stretched across the line as Derek processed this information. "How do you feel about all that?" he finally asked. "Hopeful," I admitted. "For them, and maybe for us too. It feels like everyone is finally growing up, taking responsibility for their choices." "Even me?" he asked softly. "Especially you," I said. "Are you still planning to come up this afternoon?" "Absolutely. I've been looking forward to it all week." After we hung up, I returned to the dock, retrieving my now cold coffee and sitting back down to gaze out at the water. The surface was calm today, reflecting the clear blue sky and the surrounding trees in perfect mirror image. It struck me as an apt metaphor for what we were all striving for: clarity, reflection, a chance to see ourselves and our relationships truthfully. Derek arrived just after lunch, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers and a folder of documents. "These are for you," he said, handing me the flowers with a hesitant smile. "And this," he held up the folder, "is something I've been working on with the financial advisor. I wanted to show you." We sat at the kitchen table as he spread out the papers, a comprehensive plan for our finances moving forward. Separate personal accounts would remain separate. Joint accounts would require dual approval for any withdrawal over $500, and a new savings plan would gradually rebuild what had been depleted through the years of supporting Megan. "This is impressive," I said, genuinely pleased with the thoroughness of the plan. "You've put a lot of thought into this." "I have," he agreed. "And there's one more thing." He pulled out a final document and placed it before me. It was a deed transfer form for the lake house, already filled out with my information. "What's this?" I asked, confused. "I spoke with a real estate attorney," Derek explained. "Even though the lake house is already in your name, there could potentially be some claim on it as marital property under certain circumstances. This document officially transfers any interest I might have in the property back to you as your separate asset. It affirms that I recognize this as solely your property, not subject to division or claim." I stared at the paper, then at Derek, stunned by the gesture. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," he said simply. "This place is yours, Jennifer. It always has been. I was wrong to treat it otherwise, and I want to make that right in the most concrete way possible." I felt tears spring to my eyes, the first I'd shed through this entire ordeal. Not tears of sadness or anger, but of recognition. This gesture represented something profound: Derek's willingness to not just say the right things, but to take tangible action to restore trust. "Thank you," I whispered. "There's something else I want to say," he continued, reaching for my hand across the table. "These past few weeks of therapy have made me realize how much I've taken you for granted over the years. Your competence, your independence, your success. Instead of celebrating those qualities, I think I resented them sometimes. I felt more needed, more important with Megan because she relied on me completely." He squeezed my hand gently. "But that wasn't fair to you, and it wasn't healthy for any of us. I'm learning that being a good partner isn't about being needed in that dependent way. It's about choosing each other, supporting each other as equals, even when we could manage on our own." I nodded, my own therapy sessions having led me to similar insights. "I've been thinking about that too, about how my independence sometimes created distance between us. I was so determined to prove I didn't need rescuing that perhaps I didn't let you in as much as I could have." "Where do we go from here?" Derek asked, the question that had been hovering between us for weeks. I looked around the lake house, my sanctuary, my achievement, now also the place where our marriage had begun its painful but necessary transformation. "Forward," I said simply. "Together, if that's still what we both want. But differently than before. With honesty, with respect for each other's boundaries, with real partnership." "That's what I want," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "To rebuild, to do better, to be the husband you deserve." That night, we sat on the dock watching the sunset, paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Derek's arm rested lightly around my shoulders, a familiar touch that now carried new meaning. Not possession or entitlement, but connection freely given and received. "I heard from Brian after they left here," Derek said. "He told me about their visit, about Megan's apology. He said something that stuck with me." "What was that?" I asked. "That sometimes it takes nearly losing everything to realize what truly matters," Derek replied. He was talking about their finances, their lifestyle, but I think it applies to us too. "I nearly lost you, lost us, because I couldn't see beyond my own perspective." I leaned against him slightly. We both had blind spots. The important thing is that we're seeing more clearly now. As darkness fell and stars appeared above the lake, I reflected on the journey of the past month. What had begun as a simple boundary violation, Derek offering my lake house to his sister without permission, had revealed deeper fissures in our marriage, patterns of behavior that had gone unchallenged for years. The confrontation had been painful but necessary, forcing us to examine truths we had both been avoiding. And while our marriage was still very much a work in progress, I felt cautiously optimistic about our future. 6 months later, a letter arrived at our Chicago home, postmarked Minneapolis. Inside was a check for $15,000 and a note from Megan and Brian. "Jennifer and Derek, this is the first installment of what we plan to repay. We know it's only a fraction of what Derek has given us over the years, and we understand that money alone can't repair the damage our dependency caused to your marriage. But we want you to know that we're committed to making things right in whatever way we can." The new job is going well. We've settled into a smaller house that fits our actual budget. The kids are adjusting to their new schools, and Megan has found part-time work at a local gallery. For the first time in our marriage, we're living within our means, saving for our own future, and teaching our children the financial responsibility we should have practiced all along. Therapy continues for both of us, individually and as a couple. We're unpacking years of unhealthy patterns, not just with money, but with how we relate to each other and to family. It's hard work, but necessary. We hope this finds you both well, and that your own journey of rebuilding continues to bring healing. With gratitude and love, Brian and Megan. Derek and I stared at the check in amazement. We had never expected repayment, had never even discussed it as a possibility. "What should we do with this?" Derek asked, holding the check carefully, as if it might disintegrate. I thought for a moment. "I have an idea." The following weekend, we drove to the lake house with a purpose. Over the winter, I'd noticed that the old boathouse was showing signs of wear, the roof sagging slightly, the dock attached to it beginning to rot in places. I had been setting aside money for repairs, but had not yet committed to the project. "I think we should use Megan and Brian's check to rebuild the boathouse," I suggested as we walked along the shoreline. "And when it's finished, we should invite them to visit. Not for the whole summer," I added with a smile, "but for a week perhaps. To show them that while boundaries remain important, forgiveness and new beginnings are possible too." Derek wrapped his arms around me, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "I think that's a perfect idea." That spring, construction began on the new boathouse. Derek surprised me by taking an active interest in the project, consulting with the builders, offering suggestions for improvements, even taking time off work to be present for key phases of construction. Not to control the process, but to participate in it, to share in something that mattered to me. By midsummer, the boathouse was Complete, larger than the original, with a second-story deck overlooking the lake and interior space that could serve as an additional guest area. Derek and I christened it with a bottle of champagne, just the two of us celebrating not just the new structure, but all it represented. "I've been thinking," Derek said as we sipped champagne on the new deck, watching the sunset. "This place has become important to me too, in a different way than before. Not as something to use or offer to others, but as the place where our marriage found its reset button." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. From confrontation to reconciliation. "Exactly," he agreed. And I was wondering, would you consider letting me contribute to its upkeep going forward? Not to claim ownership, he added quickly, but as a symbol of my commitment to supporting what matters to you, to us. I studied his face, seeing only sincerity in his expression. "I'd like that," I said softly. "A shared commitment to something that remains mine legally, but matters to us both." The next day, I called Megan to extend the invitation for their family to visit later in the summer. Her surprise and gratitude were evident in her voice. "Are you sure?" she asked, "after everything that happened?" "I'm sure," I replied. "The lake house is still my sanctuary, but I'm learning that sharing it on my terms, with clear boundaries and mutual respect, can be its own kind of joy." When Megan, Brian, and their children arrived 3 weeks later, something remarkable happened. Instead of the entitled attitude of the past, they arrived with gratitude and respect. The children were careful with the property. Brian offered to help with meals and cleanup, and Megan repeatedly expressed appreciation for the invitation. On their second evening, as the adults sat on the new boathouse deck while the children roasted marshmallows by the fire pit below, Megan turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I need to tell you something," she said. "This past year has been the hardest of my life. Facing my financial irresponsibility, my emotional manipulation of Derek, my jealousy of you, it's been painful and humbling." She took a deep breath. "But also the most important growth I've ever experienced. And it wouldn't have happened if you hadn't stood your ground about this place." I reached over and squeezed her hand briefly. "Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for each other is maintain healthy boundaries." "I see that now," she nodded. "And I want you to know that I respect yours. This visit means the world to us, but we understand it's by invitation only, and we'll never presume or expect it again." As summer faded into fall, Derek and I settled into a new rhythm in our marriage. The counseling continued, though less frequently now. The financial plan we'd established was working well, rebuilding our joint savings while maintaining healthy separation where appropriate. Derek had found ways to support Megan that didn't involve financial bailouts, offering advice when asked, celebrating her steps toward independence, encouraging her new career path. Their relationship was evolving from enabling dependency to genuine sibling support. My career continued to thrive, with a promotion that fall to creative director at the agency. Derek attended the celebration dinner, proudly introducing himself to my colleagues as Jennifer's husband, his pride in my accomplishments evident and unforced. One crisp October weekend, as we walked along the lake shore collecting colorful fallen leaves, Derek turned to me with a question. "Do you think we would have found our way to this healthier place without the lake house crisis?" I considered this carefully, watching the gentle waves lap against the shore. "I'm not sure. Sometimes it takes a specific moment, a clear line, being crossed, to make us see patterns we've been living with for years." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'm grateful for it, in a strange way. Not for the pain or the breach of trust, but for the wake-up call. For the chance to become better, together." "Me too," I agreed, slipping my hand into his. As we turned back toward the lake house, my sanctuary, now also our place of healing, I reflected on the journey of the past year. A simple boundary. Assertion had sparked a profound transformation. not just in my marriage, but in multiple relationships. Standing firm in my own truth had ultimately created space for everyone to grow, to confront uncomfortable realities, to build healthier connections. The lake house stood as it always had, solid and peaceful on the shoreline. But now it represented something more than just my independence and achievement. It symbolized the power of healthy boundaries, the possibility of genuine change, and the strength that comes from honoring yourself even in the face of pressure to surrender. That evening, as Derek and I sat on the porch watching darkness settle over the water, I felt a deep sense of peace. Not the tentative optimism of our early reconciliation, but something more grounded and certain. We had faced a crisis that might have ended our marriage, and instead used it as a catalyst for meaningful change. There would be challenges ahead, patterns to unlearn, moments of backsliding. But we would face them with new awareness, with respect for each other's boundaries, with commitment to the difficult, ongoing work of true partnership. And the lake house would stand as our reminder of what was nearly lost, what was painfully gained, and what continued to grow between us, stronger and more authentic than before. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.